thank you. I'm really surprised that all of you are here today. I do appreciate you taking the time to be here with us so as to set the record straight. You know, when the press thinks someone in government has done something wrong, there tends to be wall-to-wall coverage. This story has been front page news above the fold for what seems like 3 weeks now. And then, usually, when the story gets proven wrong, the retraction is put on the back page of page 10 with the obituaries. I really hope that's not the case today. And I hope that's not the case over the weekend. Today, I am providing you with 2 letters that I would like to briefly address. First of all, as you know, Attorney General Hood sent a letter to myself, my staff, all 52 members of the Senate, and many others recently, and I am responding to him 8 days later. He sent it last Wednesday. I'm responding to him today with a letter which makes it very clear that I've been advised by counsel that his informal document requests that were included in his document preservation letter creates no legal obligation on the Senate, on my office, or any individual senators to produce any documents. However, I, like I assume the Attorney General does, want to resolve any outstanding questions about this project for the public's interest, and therefore I am voluntarily responding to his request. We have conducted 2 independent reviews of electronic legislative communications by and between me, any members of my staff, with anyone at the Department of Transportation regarding the Frontage Road project, and without waiving the legislative privilege that I and other senators undisputedly have under Mississippi law, no written documents have been found that meet the criteria of his request. The other letter that I am providing to every member of the press and anyone else who will want it, we will put it on our social media pages, I am sure, is a letter that I received late yesterday afternoon from the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Transportation in response to the letter I had sent her 2 weeks ago asking for evidence and or proof that any member of the legislature acted inappropriately with respect to this or any other project. What you have here is a direct quote reading from the letter. I have never indicated any inappropriate, unacceptable, or unlawful communication with a member of the legislature. I'll say that again. A quote signed by the Executive Director of MDOT. I have never indicated any inappropriate, unacceptable, or unlawful communication with a member of the legislature. Now, obviously that is not exactly what has been written and told and said by some in the press. Now, whether or not that conflicts with what she's told some of you, I don't know. But I am telling you what her position is today. She then goes on, by the way, to say, she cannot find any media reports stating the same. Well, I'm not really sure what rock she's been hiding under for the last 3 weeks, but I will tell you that last week I came into my house and my 6-year-old ran up to me and she said, Daddy, I saw you on TV today. And she said then, they said something about somebody running against you. And that, I think, if a 6-year-old is seeing the reports of these accusations, then obviously a lot of other people are as well. So she goes on in her letter giving her definition of, quote, political pressure. And I think this is very important because it was alleged by some that political pressure is what led to the building of this road, which, by the way, has not been built, but the decision to build the road. And I'm not sure who made the decision to build the road. That is not clear to me. I don't know if it was a decision made by the commissioners, if it was a decision made by the department. I really don't know that because Mrs. McGrath's letter really leads to more questions than it provides answers. And I'm sure all of you in the media will spend a lot of time trying to get to the bottom of all of those questions. But one thing that I think is important to note here, not only does she say that she has never indicated any inappropriate, unacceptable, or unlawful communications with a member of the legislature, she then decides to define, from her perspective, political pressure. She says, and I quote, "My definition of political pressure is any legislative prioritization mandate." My definition of political pressure is any legislative prioritization mandate. No, ma'am. When duly elected representatives of the people perform their constitutional responsibility of appropriating funds, that is not political pressure. It is the enacted law of the land in our state. She points to an appropriation bill in 2014 as what she meant when she said political pressure had been applied. Now, I appreciate the executive director responding in a relatively timely fashion. I appreciate her admission that she, regardless of what has been written by some, never indicated any inappropriate, unacceptable, or unlawful communication with a member of the legislature. And so I do want to say that. I also want to point out, though, that if you look at Section 46 of the appropriation bill from 2014, this is what it reads. Of the funds appropriated in Section 1, it is the intention of the legislature that $10 million shall be used for new construction on Highway 25, Lakeland Drive. It makes absolutely no mention of the frontage road project. And so it has been reported that it was pressure by the Senate when she referred to political pressure. But let's be clear. Laws are passed in this building have to be voted on by the House of Representatives. They have to be voted on by the Senate. And short of a veto, they are signed by the governor. And so while she wanted someone to believe that this was political pressure by the Senate, the fact is we only enact laws in Mississippi with a vote of both chambers. So, but I do want to reiterate, I appreciate Mrs. McGrath's response to our letter, clearing up the uncertainty. There's been an attempt, whether intentional or not, to conflate the two issues of the widening of Lakeland Drive, which I have been, again, very, very strongly in favor of, and I'm glad that that project has been done, and at least phase 1 is completed, and the other project has been written about. So I do want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank you for getting the opportunity to provide for you the information that I have gathered in my investigation. It has been my intent since the beginning of this to get to the bottom of it. That has been very evident and I think is very important. Now, there are more questions that need to be answered, and I'm sure that each of you will reach out to the various parties and try to get clarification on these various things. Now, I will say this, and I'll conclude with this. The real scandal here is the Attorney General of our state using the threat of his prosecutorial powers of his office for his own personal and political benefit. When there was lawyers in our state bribing judges, they didn't notice. When there was a former executive director of the Department of Corrections bribing, getting bribes, they didn't notice. However, when there was a newspaper report that something might have been done without even looking into the facts, there was a decision to get involved and grandstand politically. I will tell you that it seems very clear to me that this has been politically motivated from the start. And while that is something that troubles me, my responsibility and my goal has been to find out the facts, because that's what the people of our great state have elected me to do and entrusted me to do, and I am very focused on continuing that path. So again, thank you all for being here, and I'll take a question or two, and then we'll go. Yes, sir.
I spoke to Attorney General Hood yesterday. He was a guest on my show, and I asked him about your remark that he was grandstanding when he sent the letter you referred to, and he said he sent it because, quote, the legislature decided they're not subject to the Open Records Act or the retention requirement of records. That's why he says he sent the letter. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, so the retention records request made by the Attorney General is an obligation of the legislature. I have copied him in my response today of a letter from the Tony Greer, who is the Director of the Legislative Budget Office. In our working product, the Legislative Budget Office maintains all records, and so we have responded to him with the retention policy or the retention procedures that are in place, and we will comply with his request to retain all records that we currently have. I will tell you also, remind you that we have done a search, actually 2 searches on 2 separate occasions by 2 individuals, and have found no documents at this time that meet the request that he made in his letter.
Do you think it's appropriate for the legislature to be exempt from open records requests? And to add to that point, have you ever considered a third party looking into those documents? And isn't it the role of the Attorney General to make sure that nothing frivolous is happening?
Well, as it relates to the legislature exempting itself from a number of different open records situations, that was something that was done years and years and years and years ago. I do think that there are some in the legislature that believe that if you do not allow for that privilege, then it chokes off communication between their constituents and them. That's a decision to be discussed another day. I'm sure there will be bills filed in the legislative session in 2019 to remove that exemption. I don't know if they'll go anywhere or not. Thank you.
Governor, can you explain in this letter where Ms. McGrath says, I guess first off, that this frontage road project was part of the larger earmarked 25 project. She then goes on to say, you and your staff as well as other entities were informed of the safety options under consideration, e.g. traffic signal, J-turn and frontage road. Then she goes on to talk about how your office's ongoing interest in this had put apparently some pressure on them. And she said your staff took the highly unusual step of communicating directly with utility providers on the road project.
Yeah, thank you for that question.
That seems to kind of counter some of what you're
Jeff, I appreciate that question. And yet again, you are conflating the 2 issues because that's what they want you to do. There is a widening and expansion of Highway 25 that I have long been a supporter of. In fact, again, she specifically points to the appropriation bill while she goes and conflates the 2 projects. Let me read the appropriation bill to you. Of the funds appropriated in Section 1, it is the intention of the legislature that $10 million shall be used for new construction on Highway 25/Lakeland Drive. That project, by the way, phase 1 of that project, which the legislature appropriated funds for, made them do, has been completed. In fact, it was completed over a year ago.
She
The
appears to
second
indicate
project-
that she told you and your staff that this part of the project had given you updates on that.
I have seen no evidence that that is the case, and I have talked to no one on my staff.
is she-
Look, the fact that your confidential informant did not tell you the truth, I can't do anything about that. But the fact is, she has provided no evidence. She goes and talks about, there may have been, between you and or your staff, may have been verbal communication. I'm telling you, I know of no such verbal communication.
All right, we got one more.
All right, I guess what's just like the status on, I know you said the road hasn't been built yet, but I guess is it going to be the frontage road? We don't know, and it hasn't been widened.
As someone who lives there, do you think it's needed?
The Highway 25 widening project, phase 1, which is from Airport Road, which I think is Highway 468, to Grants Ferry Road, has been completed. Phase 2 of that project, as we've been talking over the many years of this, phase 2 was supposed to be the widening of Highway 25 from Grants Ferry to Highway 471. Now keep in mind, the widening of Highway 25 is certainly advantageous to those individuals who live east of the city of Jackson. It's also advantageous to Rankin County and future economic development opportunities in Rankin County. But its support is not limited to Rankin County. Think about the person who lives in Carthage that needs to get to the hospital at St. Dominic's. Or think about the person who lives in Philadelphia that works at UNC. So there are benefits for that particular project, not only from an economic development standpoint for people throughout central Mississippi, but it's a good project long-term for the state of Mississippi. And to my knowledge, no one has said that that is not needed and should not be a priority. One more question.
Do you think it's appropriate that the Attorney General open an investigation when there is speculation out there that he could possibly face you in an election in the next year?
Well, look, I think the people of Mississippi will have to make that decision. They'll have to decide if they believe this is political grandstanding or not. I think that most people would certainly look at that and say, there is a conflict of interest when you are a potential opponent of whomever you are investigating. Now, look, it's his prerogative to do whatever he wants to do, but I think the results of any investigation, whatever they may be, are going to come into question by anyone who says, well, perhaps his motives are not nearly as pure as he tries to indicate. So perhaps he is going to hand over this to someone else, if that's what he thinks. Perhaps he's going to drop it now that that Mrs. McGrath has refuted the only accusation that has been made in published press reports. But I don't know. I can't answer that question for you. So thank y'all.
Quick point of clarification. Did that request for the communications, it went to both current and former staff members? Is that what you had said?
That is correct. The request did, I will tell you that the retention policy of the Legislative Budget Office is such that for financial reasons, they tend to write over all communications from previous staff members so as to save storage space and to save taxpayer money. However, any communications that were had, I presume, could have been retained by the Department of Transportation, which is the very reason I reached out to Mrs. McGrath and asked her to provide me with any comment on anybody that she would suggest that did anything inappropriate, and this is her response. I've never suggested or indicated any inappropriate, unacceptable, or unlawful communication with a member of the legislature. Thank y'all.